On today's Carl's Computer Corner, we're going to be taking a look at the old Raspberry Pi 3B and the 4B and seeing the difference between the two in regards to processing speed, power, power consumption, as well as memory size on both of them. I have three Raspberry Pi 4s and one Raspberry Pi 3. And I'm going to show you what's the difference between the two of them and what has changed since they came out all those years ago. Not only that, I've heard rumors about a new Raspberry Pi 5 coming out. I haven't gotten any word on it of what's happening with that yet, but at least we can talk about it in this video. So let's go downstairs and take a look. Okay, here we are. This is the Raspberry Pi 3B in fact. This is the one I first actually bought in 2017. It has a 4-core, quad-core Broadcom processor running at 1.2 gigahertz, 1 gig of RAM, and it's using a standard HDMI out for the video out. You can get an adapter, like I have here, that you can hook up to a DB15 connection like I have here. This year I also have the extension, one of my extensions for micro HDMI to regular HDMI to connect my other Raspberry Pis. This one here, like I mentioned, is one of the first ones that I had, and it's really a good basic down-to-earth, nothing too powerful as for heavy-duty use. Like I would use this definitely for a Kodi box, where you can actually do streaming off of the interwebs or internet, or use this as a basic, I would say a basic down-to-earth RetroPie gaming rig. So things like the Atari 2600, 5200, 7800, the Intellivision, ColecoVision, anything that doesn't have heavy-duty graphics on it, this should work fine. And this here, as you can see, comes with both Ethernet, 4K connections for USB 2.0. It does have Bluetooth and Wi-Fi capability, so you can actually hook this via wireless, which is good. And it does a great job. I've actually installed on this one here, on the micro SD card, I have a 128 gigabyte on this, so that way I have plenty of room with the current desktop that I had on this. When I first installed the Raspbian Pi OS 32-bit version, because it runs nice, it runs a lot easier on this one because it's 32 bits, and since I only have 1 gig of RAM on it, it works a lot better with the 1 gig on this one here. 64 bits runs a little bit slower because it's actually compiled under the 64-bit compiler, and it executes with 64 bits because the Broadcom processor is a 64-bit processor, but because of the 1 gig limitation on this one, it feels a little sluggish on it, so that's why I dropped it down to 32-bit. And I've also updated the firmware on this, so that way it's more up to date, because I had a heck of a time all those years ago in 2017, scared nearly poopless in regards to trying to update this firmware. So since the update since then, it's gotten a lot easier to update the firmware on these things, and it's a lot better. Now you notice here that it's only the Raspberry Pi 3 only has three fins, one underneath the fan which the processor is located. This is actually for the networking card, and this one here right underneath, this is the memory on it. So the memory is located on the bottom. I don't know why. I think this is the design they had on the Raspberry Pi 3. It's not to say it's a bad thing, but it's kind of odd where they had actually placed it. You figure they would be more or less on the top. It comes with the camera connection here, display connection. If you want to use a flat panel display, you have this one here, which you can actually purchase, and you can make this as a Raspbian pad or a kiosk if you want to use it as creating something like that, which is not so bad. So that's basically about it on this one. I just want to say, in comparison with this and the new Raspberry Pi 4, this still has some uses, even though it's not as powerful as the newer generation because of the memory limitations. And it's not to say it's not a bad system at all. It's just very limited because of the memory amount. But that's very minor, and you can still do other projects and some programming on it. Compiling and all that, I haven't done any testing on that, but that's okay, I guess. But because if you're doing a lot of compiling, you need the memory to do the compilation, because it'll be a lot quicker. And that's basically it about this one. Now, comparing this with the Raspberry Pi 4, just to let you know, the Raspberry Pi 4, when they came out, had 3 versions. And here I'm going to show you another clear case that I have a Raspberry Pi with 4 gigabytes of RAM, which is this one right here. This is my Raspberry Pi 4. This one here has 1.5 on the Broadcom processor, 64 bits. 2 HDMI connectors down below with the 3.5 pin, 3.5 millimeter pin for audio and video, and it uses a micro USB to power it. Just in comparison, just to show, this is the older USB connection. For the older Raspberry Pi 4, it uses a 5 volt 2.5 amp connection on it to power the Pi. This one here uses 5 volts at 3 amps. And the reason why is that because the processor, which like I said is a 1.5 gigahertz quad core from Broadcom, but also because the memory is also a lot larger. The Raspberry Pi 4 used to have a 1 gigabyte memory, 2 and 4 gigabytes of memory, which was the maximum. Then they took the 1 gigabyte off, but they added a replacement, which is an 8 gigabyte version. So, and as you can see here, the memory is no longer underneath on the bottom. It's actually right next to it. If you can see the second set of fins right here, that's the memory on it. Then you have your graphics card, your GPU, which is your graphics processor, and your networking card. And the different as well, if you notice here, you have 2 USB 2.0, 2 USB 3.0, and a true gigabit connection. They have actually modified the gigabit on this one, where it's not on any of the rails of the USB 2.0 or 3.0. On the Raspberry Pi 3, whoop, wrong end. On the Raspberry Pi 3, the gigabit is actually on the rails with the USB 2.0. So it actually gives you only 300 megabits per second when transferring on the network connection here on the gigabit. But that's okay. Like I said, I don't use this one here too much, but I'm going to use this as a small server with 1 gigabyte of RAM, which is fine. This one here is the 4 gigabyte model, and that there runs fairly smooth. I had no problems updating it at all with 4 gigabytes. And this one here has a 128 gigabyte micro SD card, and it also has the wireless built in and Bluetooth as well. Bluetooth is version 5.0, whereas the USB on the earlier version, this one here on this Raspberry Pi, it's running version 4. So that's the only real difference. And I love this case because you can actually see the insides very well, and it's just to give you an idea of what it looks like through the case. I do have 2 other ones. This one here is the actual 8 gig model, and I'm using a 256 on this one, which is going to be my more of a computer-like because of the 8 gigs of RAM, and still the same idea like the other one. as you can see here. You got your two USB 2.0, 3.0 gigabit, same thing there. And that's another 4 gigabyte with another case. But this one here, it's all not tanned up. It's actually tinted on both sides. And this one here is also running at 128 gigabyte. So this one, the 4 gigabyte on this one, and the 4 gigabyte on that one, I more or less will be using as for either RetroPie or another server, depending on what I feel up to. And the updates on these are not so bad. Once you get the default Raspberry Pi OS on this, I would suggest getting the 64-bit unit, 64-bit for models that have 4 gigabytes or more. Just for the fact is that with 4 gigabytes of memory on board, or 8 gigabytes, you'll be able to utilize the full amount of memory on it. 32-bit you can still use on even the 8 gigabyte model. It will recognize it, but depending on the application, in 32-bit mode, it will only see 4 gigabytes of RAM, but the OS will actually recognize 8 gigabytes on in the system itself. While as the 64-bit, it'll give you the full 8 gigabytes on any application that you're running, including the OS. And it's not to say that they've done the OS bad by doing that. It's just something more of a thing that they were trying to do when they were doing the beta version of the 64-bit. So they did something on the 32 which they were able to recover, or at least show the 8 gigs of RAM on board on something on the 8 gigabyte version. What I am also going to do here too, I'm going to actually show you the OS running on one of these two. Actually, I'm going to do it the 32-bit version. I'm going to actually show you on this, on one of these, not on the 64, but on the 30, on the Raspberry Pi 3. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to log on to one of these ones, either the 4 or the 8. And what we're going to do together, and I'm actually going to show you, I've actually downloaded the software to do the burn-ins for the Raspberry Pi. So if you have a micro SD card or an SD card like I have here, this is a spare one that I have, which I can actually pull out. And what I'm going to do with that there is we're going to actually burn in a version of Ubuntu for the Raspberry Pi, either the version of Genome that's available, or Métis. So that way we can be able to take a look at it on the 4 gigabyte or on the 8. And that I'll show you what to do and how to do it, which will make things a lot easier on the Raspberry Pi 3. So if you're fortunate enough like me, I did it on one system where I downloaded the actual software, both Etcher and the Raspberry Pi version of Imager to do it. So I'll do it in one just to show you how easy it is. And I've also downloaded the ISOs on it, so I won't go through the whole mess of downloading the ISO, then burning it. I have the ISOs available. I just have to copy it onto the space that I have on the micro SD card, and just show you how to do it that way, because that way it'll be a lot easier, and you'll find it fun. Once you get it onto the micro SD card, the only thing that takes longer on these things is the first time you boot it up. Because what happens with these is when you do install a fresh version of the OS on these things, it transfers the files over, but it does not do the partition right away on the micro SD card. Even if you have a 128 or a 256 gigabyte or whatever size you have, it gives you the base files to work with and some other compressed files that it will actually unpack after the formatting is done and the partitioning, or I should say the partitioning and the formatting because it'll transfer everything in one shot over. Then it will actually ask you some basic questions, like to log in, time and date, the setup, language, and all that, and where you're located. So that way it gets done. Once that is done on these things, I usually suggest to go into terminal and do an update of the OS, just in case, because sometimes they do patches on the OS and to get that updated. Once that is done, then it's to do the firmware updates. The firmware updates usually mean the BIOS that's on here. I've done it on all three. Actually, yeah, on all three, on all the 64, on the Raspberry Pi 4, and on my Raspberry Pi 3. This one I had a hard time getting the updates done because the firmware was not up to date. So I did the firmware first once I got this here started. And once I did that, I did the software updates, and then it was working perfectly fine afterwards. So let me turn it off here. I'm actually going to get it set up so you can actually see the screen. Once we have the screen up, I'll show you the actual OS. Heck, I might just go with my Raspberry Pi 4 and actually do it that way, because it's the same thing, because the OS hasn't changed. But at least to give you an idea of what Raspbian looks like on a Raspberry Pi. And then we'll do the actual transfer of the file itself, which is going to take a fair time, but we'll do it through the trickeries of video editing, where we'll actually get it done quicker. Okay? And let's go. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, here is my screen that we're going to be actually using to videotape the actual recording. There's my little Raspberry Pi 3B, and let's get that turned on just to show you that it's actually going to start working. There we go, the little fan turns on. Now, I'm just going to give it a few moments there to load up. Now, I'm running Raspbian 32-bit on this particular computer, as you can see here, and I'm going to just turn off the light in the background because it's going to be annoying. There we go. So, this is what it actually looks like coming out after you had done the installation. And if you really want to know if it's actually a Raspberry Pi 3, and I'm going to actually show you here. Where is it? Is it here? Here we go. No, that's print. Here we go. Task Manager. So here we go. As we can see, CPU usage is at 1 or 2%. Get that thing off. And then the memory here. 875 megabytes free. And you got 110 megabytes used. 110 megabytes. Now by default, Raspbian is very basic. I've added one or two other things, like the Arduino IDE, which is a programming interface for the Arduino microcontrollers. But as you can see here, it comes with some basic stuff. The programming language, education, Office comes with a base thing of LibreOffice, which is a good alternative to Microsoft Office, just for you guys to know. I've used this as an alternative. And just to show you, this is actually the equivalent of Word from Microsoft. Just have to wait for it to load. Like I said, with this here is because it's with 1 gigabyte of memory, it's not the fastest one that you can get. And down here we can get some other stuff with text document, spreadsheet, presentation, drawing, formula, database, so on and so forth. But I use this here for often enough to do many things that I like doing. Whoop. There we go. And there's the spreadsheet equivalent of Excel. Now, when would you use something like Raspberry Pi 3 over Raspberry Pi 4? It'll depend. And I'm saying this as a true and honest decision. The only time you probably might want to use a Raspberry Pi 3 over a Raspberry Pi 4 is if you're going to be dealing with small stuff, like if you're doing something that's really basic, like a kiosk, or if you're going to deal something like, example, RetroPie, or another one which is equivalent to RetroPie, which I'm going to show you later on the Raspberry Pi 4, which is basically playing retro games. Now, I don't have on here that actual application that I use for installing stuff onto the micro SD cards, but I'll definitely do it soon. It comes with some basic stuff, graphic imager or imager viewer. You can actually go out on the web. Comes with Chrome or Chromium, depending on how. There we go. Don't need 2 instances, I just need 1. But it comes down with some really nice stuff here. Here we go. Preferences. And here we go, we got Raspberry Pi Configurator. This lets you actually configure certain things from it. Like system password for your Raspberry Pi, name the host name for it, so you can give it different names, display, set resolution as well. So you got different resolutions that you can set to on it automatically. Cancel that. Interface. In many cases, like if you want to remote into it, you can actually have these enabled, like SSH for remoting in, or VNC, serial port, remote GPID, performance level. That's for memory, and you can also overclock it as well. But I haven't done it personally, and I'm not going to. Localization, set local parameters like where you are, Canada, so on and so forth. Character set. But you can set that time and date, time zone, which I have all set. The fun thing about this is that it doesn't take up too much power, and you can set up certain things. There is as well preference, add and remove software. You can actually load up apps through the add remove software section, and they do give you a whole bunch of stuff, accessories, interfaces, communication, Genome desktop, other desktops, games. Where is it? Games. Well, I just saw it here. Here we go. Games. Okay. Sometimes what you can do, and I'm going to pull up this one here. Geotron, which is a nice 3D game of light cycles. Takes a little while from here. Yeah, here we go, Geotron. See, now it's asking me for my password, which I do use to install it in. Anyhow, but that's not much of a problem. So anyhow, that's basically about it. Again, you can also change as well desktop. You can change actually the background. I like the mount. I like the laser on this one. It makes it easier for me to distinguish this one from the other one. So there we go. Now, with 1 gig of RAM, you can't do that much. I'm going to set this here one up as a server for my personal use, but I'm going to use something completely different from Raspbian itself. They do have one that's in text mode, but that's something different. Let's get this here closed out, and I'm going to bring you over to the other one, which is the Raspberry Pi 4. And once again, I'll definitely show you the entry point on it. Shut down. And let's get the other one set up, and I'll show you. Okay, here we go. This is round number 2. This is the one with the 8 gigabyte version of the Raspberry Pi 4. Let's get her started up. Now this one here, I'm running the same thing as the other one, a Raspbian version of the OS. Basically, it's the same thing as the other one. The only difference is that this one here has 8 gigabytes. And if this will come up, let's give it a few moments. Yep, here we go. It's actually loading. There we go. Now that's the OS itself, and in the upper right hand corner, I don't know if you'll see it, I do have a temperature gauge and the percentage of being used on all 4 core processors. So again, I just made this a little bit simpler. I changed the background from one to the other, so that way it'll be noticeably different. And if I can get to, not the internet, not Google, I should have pulled up the other one. Here we go. Bink. Close that. Accessories. Monitor. There we go. Now, this one here it's the same thing. As you can see, the memory is slightly larger, which is it's using 130 megabytes out of the 8 gigs, so that's why you see it. Also, I've switched the video memory to 128, so you have to minus the 128 on that there. So that is running perfectly fine. And once again, I do have some other options here that I've actually installed in, and this here you're gonna like. Where is it? Preference? No, here we go. Accessories. What I did do is I went to Raspberry Pi's website, and I've also installed the Raspberry Pi imager on this, so that way I can actually do my ISOs directly on a Raspberry Pi. So I can, let's say, choose Raspberry Pi 32-bit, that's the standard one. And they have some other ones here. Full with desktop environment and recommended applications, just a bare desktop. They have some other general OSs like Ubuntu, Manjaro, which we're going to be seeing in the next little clip here. I do have one on a 32 gig, 64 gigabyte image, which is nice to see. It's a different one from Raspbian here. We have also Media Player, which is LibreElect, and OSMC, which is basically Kodi on OSMC. Emulators. Okay, basically there's 2 types of emulators that we have here for Raspberry Pi. One of them happens to be the popular RetroPie, which is you're going to have to manually install the emulator first before you can actually install the ROMs on there. Or you have somewhere like in the recall box, they give you over 100 different games. They already put the images on there of some of the games plus the emulators themselves, so that one's already a pre-made packages. So if you're a guy like me, an old git who remembers the Atari 2600, the Intellivision, ColecoVision, Atari 7800, 5200, and some of the other older games, gaming consoles, before the NES, Super NES, and the other ones. You'll love this, believe you me. You also will see the Recall Box 2, which will be in this video as well. I won't be playing as many games, but just to give you the environment, what it looks like. So that way you get an idea. Other specific. So, see, this is other ones here like Octopi to do 3D printing. Make a digital signage, homebrew, into a homebrew smart home. So you got a couple other things that are included on there. Other language to speak specific, Russian. Miscellaneous utilities. This is for programming the firmware or the BIOS that's on there. I did find an easier way to do that, and that's with RPI update, which is actually a command line. What it is, it's basically checks out on the web for you for the firmware at Raspberry Pi, and then it'll do a manual update. Here we got a simple, no, not gonna erase. You can erase the SD card to FAT32. I've tried this within Imager, even on DOS and on here. It doesn't work too well on it, and the reason being is it's a finicky little thing on this. It's not a bad thing, but it's something really finicky. And then you also have your section for custom ROMs, where you can actually go and download your OS, or use this to burn your OS onto it. So that's one of the two. And if I bring the other one up, where is it? Here we go. This one other people may know as well. This is an alternative to the Raspberry Pi Imager. I've used it too myself, and it's a good little alternative. It's called the Etcher, and I've used this from time to time as well, just as an alternative to using the Raspberry Pi Imager. Basically, you can select the image that you want to load up, and then you tell it which micro SD card you want to use. I have a little portable one here that I can actually put in a 32 micro SD card on it, and then you can let it start burning. This one here will actually, depending on the size, will also verify the image as well on it before going. So let's go to the next one, and we'll have some fun. Yay! So let's do it. Log off. Shut down. If you're wondering how come I know when to shut down, usually I'll get this little screen saying, okay, there's no, like there, no input to signal, so I can actually turn off the Raspberry Pi itself and disconnect. So let's go. Okay, instead of showing you Manjaro, I'm actually going to show you something completely different. This is called Phoenix. It's another operating system that is not directly from or related to Raspberry Pi, but they do have a version for the Raspberry Pi, which I think is very amusing. Very nice backdrop, by the way. It's also using Comps, which is another application which lets you actually have nice, neat little effects, like the wobbling sign here, like that I'm using with Word, or documentation for it. Zip, zip. There's Google and all its wobbly effects. What I really like about this one is that it's completely different from Raspbian and the LXCM, or one of the many faces that you can have available. As we can see, we've got a whole bunch of stuff here. I've added some extra games, of course, that comes by. There's RetroPie here. There's a few other things here besides RetroPie and some of the popular games. I've added some of the programming languages as well, as you can see over here. And the real difference is that this one here happens to be a nice little alternative to Raspbian. And here I'm going to also show you that they do have different themes on this. Just minimize that out. Themes takes a little while to load up because there's many different themes on it that you can actually load into it. This happens to be one of many, and as we can see here, you got different ones. You got barrel, it changes it automatically. You can also have what looks like paper. Another one that I've seen here, VR virtual runner, I don't know. Another nice one, if you want the interface to look like Apple or like one of the OSs from Apple, you got Yosemite, which happens to be nice as an alternative. Again, you have the three options. Here we go, stick window. Okay, it doesn't give you the minimize on it. Anyhow, here we go. And basically that's it on this. Yes, you can actually change the backdrop here. Configure desktop. And you can actually choose through several others. These ones here I haven't loaded in yet. I don't know why. Okay, there's nothing there. Okay, they do give you some other ones here, like the defaults. Which is nice. I mean, as they come in. But I've switched it over to this one here, which I happen to like. Apply. So it's not so bad. Anyhow, let's actually go. Let's take a look. Where's it? There we go. That's the one I liked. So that's basically this one here. Yes, you can actually run Word and all that, and you have your version of Excel that comes up, which I really enjoy. So let's take a look at one other thing there that I happen to love. Show window. Bing. Okay, we're going to go actually for one last other place. One thing I wanted to mention here as well, there is a feature that you can actually add, which requires, can't even do it. Okay, I'm going to have to set up a little tripod later on, but with comps you can actually switch desktops, and that's something that I haven't done before. Sorry about that. I don't know, I hope I did. I hope you saw it. Anyhow, let's go out to one last one, which is actually going to be for playing games, console games. So let's go. Okay, here we are. We got finally Recall Box actually, and this is actually a video game emulator to play popular games from the past, like your local arcades, Commodore Amiga 600, Amstrad, Apple II, GS. There's a long list here, including Commodore 64, the good old ColecoVision, which I remember a friend having in his heyday, along with a couple other ones like Game Gear, Game Boy Advance, Game Boy Color, and as you can see here, this is the Game Boy Color, which also shows adapters for the other Game Boys. GX400, my good old Intellivision, Lynx, Sega Master System, Genesis, MSX, MSX2 Plus, Nintendo Entertainment System, Auric, TurboGrafx 16, Pokemon, Sports, Scrunum, YM, VM, Virtual something or other, SG-1000, which is from Sega, Super Nintendo, Solaris, Thompson, TIC-80, Vectrex, Sinclair, and back to the arcades. Now, some of them do have games in it. Let's just try to get one in there. Gives you a small listing of what's there, of some of the samples. Now, as certain things go, as most things go nowadays, select. So this is just a sample of what they have on the system itself, which gives you a idea as for what games are available as for emulation. Now, I haven't gone through this personally myself. I did download some extra ROMs, which I am going to try to attempt to add into here. It's just a matter of finding a way of doing it. On the good old RetroPie system, you can actually add them in by using a what they call is a using a USB stick. But here they're actually showing you that you can actually do it another way by remoting into the system itself, which I haven't tried, which I am going to try eventually. It's just a matter of with what I can do that in. And I'm going to definitely try. Yep, back up. Try 5200. Let's see what's on there. Burger Time! Or otherwise known as Beef Drop. What I am going to try to do is try to get the emulators on there. There's Qbert or BingQ, Boink, Dungeon Master. That looks actually like the old Intellivision system Night Attack or Nighthawk or something like that. It's another game from the Intellivision itself. That one I'm not too sure of. Astro Smash. This is Meteor Shower. Very similar to the other one. Anyhow. What I'm planning to do is actually take a look and see if I can actually take a try at it. Recruiting org. Wolfing, Forto. Exevious. Holy doodles. There's ColecoVision, that's only one. That's also one. Some interesting titles on this. Not all of them are my favorite, I can tell you truthfully, but I can only say that I'm going to give these guys a try. But what I am going to do is I am actually going to get some extra ones in there. Especially for the Intellivision and Lynx, because I found on archive.org you can actually download a whole ROM set of the games that are available. So I'm going to try to get that in there and actually start trying to play them. But this here is all running off of this little guy here, which is the Raspberry Pi 4 with 4 gigs of RAM and the 1.5. You've seen this before in the very beginning. It's a great little system, besides being a little computer, but you can also emulate a lot of games. It's just a matter of setting it up and trying it out. And I'm also using a Logitech mouse, a Logitech keyboard, joystick. Funny thing is this one here I have to manually set it in RetroPie. On this here, it actually gives you it as an automatic update. So, non-editable games, jump to letters, sort by games, show folder content, update game list. Anyhow, this is basically what they have. Update games. Game settings, controller settings, listing. There we go. I'm going to actually exit out here. There we go. Quit. And basically about it. That's the recall box. So ladies and gentlemen, let me know what you think. Give me a thumbs up if you like it, thumbs down if you didn't like it, and put in the comments what you think should have been done better on this one. Catch you later, guys. Have a good one.